The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty trading post, and Adelaide Winston pressed her gloved hand against the window, searching desperately for a face she had seen only in a faded photograph, her heart hammering with equal parts anticipation and dread. The year was 1878, and Aspen, Colorado was nothing like the letters had promised. Adelaide stepped down from the coach onto the muddy street, her traveling dress already begrimed from 3 weeks of rough travel. The mountain air hit her lungs, thin and cold despite the June sunshine. She clutched her carpet bag tighter, scanning the handful of weathered faces that had gathered to watch the stagecoach arrival. None of them belonged to Marcus Brennan, the man who had written her such beautiful letters promising a home, a family, and a fresh start far from the suffocating expectations of Boston society. "Excuse me." Adelaide approached an older woman standing outside the general store. "I am looking for Marcus Brennan. He runs a ranch somewhere near town." The woman's face fell, and she exchanged a glance with the man beside her. "Oh dear, you must be the bride he sent for. I am so sorry, miss, but Marcus left town near about 2 months ago. Just up and disappeared one day. Took his horse and some supplies and rode out. Ain't nobody seen him since." The words hit Adelaide like a physical blow. She steadied herself against a wooden post, her vision swimming. "Left, but he sent me a ticket. He asked me to come. We were to be married." "His brother Vincent is still running the ranch," the man offered, his voice gentler now. "The Brennan place is about 5 miles north, following the creek road. Vincent might know more about where Marcus went." Adelaide nodded numbly, unable to form words. She had sold everything she owned to prepare for this journey. Her family had disowned her for pursuing such an unconventional path. There was no money for a return ticket, and even if there had been, she had no home to return to. The reality of her situation settled over her like a heavy blanket, suffocating and absolute. She hired a wagon from the livery stable with the last of her traveling money, and followed the directions up into the foothills. The landscape was breathtaking, all sweeping valleys and jagged peaks still crowned with snow, but Adelaide could barely appreciate it through the fog of her panic. What would she do? Where would she go? The Brennan ranch appeared around a bend in the road, a modest but well-maintained spread with a sturdy log house, a large barn, and several corrals holding horses and cattle. As Adelaide pulled the wagon to a stop in the yard, a man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of beard shadowing his strong jaw. His eyes were a startling blue, visible even from a distance, and they widened with surprise as he took in Adelaide and her obvious purpose in arriving with a trunk and traveling bags. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep and cautious. Adelaide climbed down from the wagon, her legs unsteady after the drive. "Are you Vincent Brennan?" "I am." "My name is Adelaide Winston. I came from Boston to marry your brother Marcus, but I arrived in town today to learn that he has gone missing." Vincent's expression darkened, and he approached slowly, as if she were a spooked horse that might bolt. "Marcus wrote to you for 6 months. He sent me money for the journey and asked me to come. We were to be married as soon as I arrived." Adelaide's voice cracked on the last words, and she hated herself for the weakness. She had always prided herself on her composure, but the events of the day had stripped her defenses bare. Vincent removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with what to say. "Miss Winston, I did not know Marcus had contacted anyone. He never mentioned a bride. If I had known, I would have written to warn you not to come." "Where is he?" "I honestly do not know. We had a disagreement about the ranch, about some debts he had accumulated gambling." I told him he needed to take responsibility, and the next morning he was gone. That was 8 weeks ago. I have tried to find him, asked around in every town within 2 days' ride, but nobody has seen him. It is like he vanished into thin air. Adelaide felt the last of her strength drain away. Her knees buckled, and suddenly Vincent was there, his strong hands catching her elbows and steadying her. Up close, she could see the concern in his eyes, the genuine distress at her situation. "When did you last eat?" he asked gently. "Yesterday morning, I think. I cannot quite remember." Without another word, Vincent guided her toward the house, leaving her bags in the wagon. The interior was simple but clean, with handmade furniture and curtains that looked like they could use a woman's touch. He settled her into a chair at the kitchen table and began preparing food with the efficient movements of a man accustomed to taking care of himself. "I do not have much in the way of fancy cooking," he said, slicing bread and layering it with cold beef and cheese, "but it will fill your stomach." Adelaide ate mechanically, barely tasting the food but feeling some strength return with each bite. Vincent sat across from her, his expression troubled. "I am sorry my brother did this to you," he said finally. "It was wrong of him to make promises he did not keep. If I had known, I would have stopped him, or at least made sure you knew the truth before you traveled all this way." "What will I do?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "I have no money to return home, and even if I did, I have no home to return to. I burned those bridges when I decided to come west." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those piercing blue eyes. "You could stay here." Adelaide's head snapped up. "I beg your pardon. The ranch is big enough for 2 people, and truth be told, I could use the help. I have been trying to manage everything alone since Marcus left, and it is too much for one person. I cannot pay you much, but I can offer room and board, and it would give you time to figure out what you want to do next. No strings attached, no expectations. Just a safe place to stay until you get back on your feet. You do not even know me. Why would you offer such kindness to a stranger? Because it is the right thing to do, and because my brother wronged you, even if he is not here to make it right himself. Let me do it for him." The offer was outrageous by every social standard Adelaide had been raised with. An unmarried woman living on a ranch with an unmarried man would be scandalous. But then again, she had already thrown propriety to the wind when she agreed to become a mail-order bride. And what choice did she have? The alternative was to sleep on the streets of Aspen or try to find work in one of the saloons, which would be far more damaging to her reputation than staying on a ranch with an honest man. "I accept," she said, meeting his eyes. "And thank you. I will work hard to earn my keep." "I do not doubt it," Vincent said, and for the first time since she had arrived, he smiled. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges and revealing the kind man beneath the weathered exterior. That first night, Vincent gave Adelaide his room and insisted on sleeping in the barn. She protested, but he would not hear of it. The room was sparse but comfortable, with a large bed covered in quilts and a window that looked out over the valley. Adelaide lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness and wondering how her life had taken such a dramatic turn. Just yesterday morning, she had been filled with nervous excitement about meeting her future husband. Now that future had evaporated like morning mist, replaced by uncertainty and dependence on a stranger's charity. The next morning, Adelaide woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee brewing. She dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses and found Vincent already at work in the barn. He glanced up as she approached, his expression guarded. "I was not sure if you would still be here," he admitted. "I thought you might have second thoughts and taken the wagon back to town. I gave you my word I would stay and help. I do not break my promises even when others have broken theirs to me." Something shifted in Vincent's expression, a respect that had not been there before. "Good, because I am about to put you to work." And work she did. Vincent taught her to feed the chickens, collect eggs, milk the cow, and tend the vegetable garden that had been struggling without proper attention. The tasks were foreign to Adelaide, who had spent her life in drawing rooms and libraries, but she attacked them with determination. Her hands blistered and her back ached, but there was something satisfying about the physical labor, about seeing tangible results from her efforts. Vincent proved to be a patient teacher, never mocking her inexperience or making her feel foolish when she made mistakes. He showed her how to hold the milk pail so the cow would not kick it over, how to tell which eggs were fresh and which needed to be discarded, how to pull weeds without disturbing the delicate vegetable plants. "You are a quick learner," he said approvingly at the end of that first week, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "I have always been good at learning new things. My father used to say I had too much curiosity for a woman, that it would get me into trouble." Adelaide smiled sadly. "I suppose he was right. I do not think curiosity is something to be ashamed of. The world needs people who want to learn and grow." They fell into a comfortable routine over the following weeks. Adelaide rose before dawn to start breakfast while Vincent handled the horses and cattle. They worked together through the day, breaking only for meals and the hottest afternoon hours when even the animals sought shade. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and talked, sharing stories of their lives. Vincent told her about growing up in Missouri, about how their father had died when he and Marcus were teenagers, leaving them to support their mother and two younger sisters. About how they had worked as ranch hands for years, saving every penny until they could afford to buy this land and start their own operation. About how their mother had passed 2 years ago, and their sisters had both married and moved away, leaving just the 2 brothers to run the ranch. "Marcus always wanted more," Vincent said one evening, his voice heavy with regret. "More land, more cattle, more money. He was never content with what we had built. That is what led to the gambling, the debts. He thought he could win big and expand the ranch overnight. Instead, he nearly lost everything." "Is that why you argued?" "Partly. But it was more than that. I wanted him to settle down, to take responsibility. I thought if he found a good woman, got married, started a family, it would give him something to work for besides his own ambitions." "I guess he thought so too, which is why he contacted you. But when things got bad with the debts, when the pressure mounted, he ran instead of facing it." Adelaide was quiet for a moment. "Do you think he is still alive?" "I do not know, I hope so. Despite everything, he is still my brother." As the weeks turned into months, Adelaide found herself thinking less and less about Marcus and more about Vincent. The man who had offered her sanctuary without asking anything in return. The man who worked from sunup to sundown to keep the ranch running, who treated his animals with kindness and his few neighbors with respect. The man whose rare smiles made her heart skip beats. She caught herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, admiring the way his shoulders moved as he repaired a fence, the concentration on his face as he worked with a difficult horse, the gentleness in his hands as he tended an injured calf. She began to take extra care with her appearance, wearing her nicer dresses even for ranch work, pinning her hair in more flattering styles. Vincent seemed to be having his own struggle. Adelaide noticed the way his gaze lingered on her, how he found excuses to stand close when they worked together, how his voice softened when he said her name. But he never crossed the line of propriety, never took advantage of their situation. He was unfailingly respectful, treating her like a business partner rather than the woman she increasingly wanted to be to him. The tension between them built like a summer storm, electric and inevitable. It finally broke on a hot August afternoon when Adelaide was working in the garden. She had removed her bonnet to feel the breeze and had not noticed Vincent approaching until his shadow fell across her. "You will get sunburned," he said, his voice rough. She looked up, squinting against the bright sky. "I needed to feel the air. It is so hot today." He held out his hand to help her up, and when she took it, neither of them let go. They stood there in the garden, hands clasped, both knowing they had crossed some invisible threshold. "Adelaide," Vincent said, and her name on his lips was like a prayer. "I need to tell you something." "Yes." "These past months with you here, they have been the happiest of my life. I know that is wrong. You came here to marry my brother, but I cannot help how I feel. You are intelligent, hardworking, kind, and so beautiful it takes my breath away. I think about you constantly. I dream about you. And I am sorry, because this is not what you signed up for, and I am not the brother you chose." Adelaide's heart was racing so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Vincent, I need to tell you something too. Whatever I felt or thought I felt for Marcus, it was based on letters, on imagination. It was not real. But this, what I feel for you, this is real. I see you every day. I know your character, your heart, your soul, and I have fallen in love with you." The words hung in the air between them for a breathless moment, and then Vincent was pulling her close, his arms wrapping around her as if he would never let go. He buried his face in her hair, and she felt him trembling. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her ear. "Are you absolutely certain? Because if we do this, if we acknowledge these feelings, there is no going back. I will not be able to let you go." Adelaide pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." Vincent cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her, gentle at first and then with increasing passion. Adelaide melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her whole body coming alive in a way she had never experienced. This was nothing like the chaste affection she had imagined sharing with Marcus. This was fire and desire and a connection that went soul deep. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Adelaide. Not because of some letters or promises made by someone else. Marry me because you want to, because you love me as much as I love you." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They rode into Aspen the next day and spoke with the circuit preacher who traveled through the mining camps and small towns in the area. He agreed to marry them the following Sunday, giving them a week to prepare. Word spread quickly through the small community, and while there were some raised eyebrows and whispered gossip about the mail-order bride marrying the wrong brother, most people seemed genuinely happy for them. The older woman Adelaide had met on her first day in town, whose name was Martha Sullivan, offered to help her alter one of her nicer dresses into something suitable for a wedding. "I always thought Vincent Brennan was a good man," Martha said as she pinned the hem. "His brother was charming, but there was something unreliable about him. You are better off with Vincent if you ask me." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Adelaide wore a dress of pale blue silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Martha had helped her pin wildflowers in her hair. Vincent wore his best suit, his hair freshly cut and his beard neatly trimmed. He looked so handsome that Adelaide's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the front of the small church. There were perhaps 20 people in attendance, neighbors and townspeople who had come to witness the union. As Adelaide walked down the short aisle, she felt no doubt, no fear, only joy and certainty. This was right. This was what she had traveled all this way to find, even if it had not come in the package she expected. Vincent's hands were steady as he took hers, his eyes never leaving her face as they spoke their vows. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to Adelaide's eyes. The community had organized a small reception in the church social hall, with food and music and dancing. Adelaide found herself swept into conversations with people eager to welcome her to the community. She met other ranchers and their wives, shopkeepers from town, miners who worked the silver claims in the surrounding mountains. For the first time since arriving in Colorado, she felt like she belonged somewhere. As the sun began to set, Vincent took her hand and led her outside. They stood together watching the mountains turn purple in the fading light, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible." They rode back to the ranch as husband and wife, and Vincent carried her over the threshold of the house that was now truly their home. That night, they consummated their marriage with a passion and tenderness that left Adelaide feeling cherished and complete. This was what love was supposed to be, she realized as she lay in Vincent's arms afterward, listening to his heartbeat. Not pretty words in letters, but actions and presence and genuine connection. The months that followed were filled with hard work, but also happiness. As autumn painted the Aspens gold and winter brought heavy snows, Adelaide and Vincent built a life together. They worked side by side, weathering storms and setbacks, celebrating small victories like a successful cattle sale or a particularly good harvest from the root cellar. Adelaide discovered that she loved ranch life, the rhythm of the seasons, the satisfaction of building something with her own hands. She learned to ride well, to help with calving season, to keep accounts and manage the household budget. Vincent, in turn, seemed to soften in her presence, smiling more readily, talking about dreams and plans for the future. They spoke occasionally about Marcus, wondering where he had gone and if he was safe. But as time passed, the pain of his abandonment faded, replaced by gratitude that his disappearance had brought Adelaide and Vincent together. Winter settled deep over the mountains, and Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent on Christmas morning, her voice trembling with excitement and nervousness. He lifted her into the air and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." The pregnancy was difficult. The mountain winter seemed endless, and Adelaide struggled with sickness and fatigue. Vincent hovered over her anxiously, doing everything he could to make her comfortable. He took over all the heavy work, insisting she rest and stay warm. He cooked for her, bringing her favorite foods, reading to her in the evenings by the fire. "You are going to spoil me," Adelaide protested one evening as he brought her yet another pillow to prop behind her back. "That is my intention," Vincent said seriously. "You are carrying our child. You deserve to be spoiled." Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting in patches to reveal the first brave wildflowers. Adelaide's belly swelled, and she spent hours sewing tiny clothes and blankets. Martha Sullivan and some of the other ranch wives visited regularly, bringing gifts and advice, welcoming Adelaide fully into their community. It was Martha who was there when Adelaide's labor started on a warm May morning. Vincent had ridden into town for supplies, and the pains began suddenly and intensely. Martha sent her husband to fetch the midwife and stayed with Adelaide, coaching her through the contractions with the calm authority of a woman who had birthed 6 children of her own. Vincent arrived home to find his wife in labor and nearly panicked. Adelaide actually laughed through her pain at the sight of his pale face. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time," Martha told him firmly. "Your job is to boil water and stay out of the way." The labor lasted through the afternoon and into the evening. Adelaide had never experienced such pain, but every time she thought she could not endure another moment, She looked up to find Vincent there, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, murmuring words of encouragement and love. Finally, as the sun was setting, their son was born. The midwife placed the squalling infant on Adelaide's chest, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face with overwhelming love. "He is beautiful," Vincent whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You are amazing. Thank you for this gift." They named him William, after Vincent's father. The baby had Vincent's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair. He was healthy and strong-lunged, making his presence known at all hours of the night. Those early weeks were exhausting but magical. Adelaide had never been happier, despite the sleepless nights and constant demands of a newborn. Vincent was a devoted father, walking the floor with William when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, looking at his son with such wonder and love that it made Adelaide's heart ache. Summer brought long, warm days and the busy work of running the ranch. Adelaide wore William in a sling while she worked, and he slept peacefully to the rhythm of her movements. Neighbors stopped by to meet the baby and offer congratulations. The ranch was prospering under Vincent's careful management, and there was talk of buying more land to expand their operation. Life had settled into a comfortable pattern when, on a hot July afternoon, a rider approached the house. Adelaide was in the garden with William on a blanket beside her when she heard the horse. She stood, shading her eyes against the sun, and her blood ran cold. The rider was Marcus Brennan. He looked terrible, thin and worn, his clothes dirty and his face haggard. He dismounted slowly, moving like a much older man, and stood staring at Adelaide with an expression of shock. "Who are you?" he asked, though there was recognition in his eyes. "You know who I am," Adelaide said quietly. "I am Adelaide Winston, the woman you sent for and then abandoned." Marcus flinched. "I did not mean to. I got scared. The debts were piling up, and I thought if I disappeared, they would go after Vincent instead and he could handle it. He was always the strong one, the responsible one. I am a coward." "Yes, you are," Adelaide agreed, her voice hard. "Do you have any idea what you put me through? I traveled halfway across the country to marry you. I had no money, no home to return to. If it had not been for your brother's kindness, I would have been destitute." "Vincent," Marcus's gaze sharpened. "Where is my brother?" "Out checking the northern fence line. He should be back within the hour." Marcus glanced at the baby on the blanket, and understanding dawned on his face. "That is Vincent's child." "Our child, yes. William, he is 3 months old. You married Vincent. It was not a question." "Yes, I did. After you disappeared and left me stranded, he offered me a place to stay, treated me with kindness and respect, and we fell in love. He is twice the man you will ever be, Marcus Brennan." Marcus's face crumpled, and Adelaide was shocked to see tears in his eyes. "I know that. I have always known it. That is why I ran. I could not stand disappointing him again, watching him clean up another one of my messes. I thought it would be easier if I just disappeared." "Easier for who?" "Certainly not for me or your brother." Before Marcus could respond, they heard the sound of another horse approaching. Vincent came around the barn at a gallop, clearly having spotted the strange horse in the yard. He dismounted in one fluid motion and strode toward them, his expression hard. "Marcus. Vincent." The two brothers faced each other, years of complicated history hanging between them. Vincent was taller, broader, his face tanned and strong from months of hard work. Marcus looked diminished in comparison, broken by whatever had happened to him in the months he had been gone. "Where have you been?" Vincent's voice was controlled, but Adelaide could hear the anger underneath. "Denver, mostly, trying to make money to pay back the debts. I got work as a dealer in a gambling hall, but it turns out I am not much better at running a table than I was at playing." I got fired last month and have been working my way back, taking odd jobs. I came home because I have nowhere else to go." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know what you did? The position you put Adelaide in when you disappeared without warning," she told me. "And I am sorry. I am sorry for everything." Marcus looked at Adelaide, his expression genuine in its remorse. "If I had known what would happen, if I had been thinking clearly, I would have canceled the arrangement before you ever left Boston. But I was panicking, not thinking straight. There is no excuse for what I did to you." Adelaide met his eyes and saw real regret there, real shame. Her anger drained away, replaced by pity. Marcus had lost so much through his own weakness and fear. "Thank you for the apology. It does not fix what happened, but I appreciate hearing it." Vincent picked up William from the blanket, cradling his son against his chest with practiced ease. "Marcus, you are my brother and I love you, but I cannot go back to how things were before. Adelaide is my wife now. This is our ranch, our life. If you want to stay, you are welcome, but things will be different. I understand. And Vincent, for what it is worth, I am glad. Adelaide deserves better than me, and so do you. You both deserve happiness. I can see that you have found it together." Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. "I do not want to disrupt your life. I just need a place to rest for a few days, maybe earn some money doing work around the ranch, and then I will move on." "You do not have to leave," Vincent said, surprising both Marcus and Adelaide. "You are family. We can figure out a way to make this work. But you need to understand that things have changed. I am in charge of the ranch now. You follow my lead, my decisions, and you start taking responsibility for your actions." Marcus nodded, his throat working. "I can do that. I want to do that. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you for being a better man than I deserve as a brother." The next few weeks were strange and tense as they all adjusted to the new arrangement. Marcus stayed in the barn, working hard during the day to help with the ranch chores. He was careful to be respectful and keep his distance from Adelaide, never overstepping or trying to claim any kind of relationship with her beyond basic courtesy. Adelaide watched the brothers work together and saw how different they were. Marcus was charming and quick-witted, but there was a restlessness to him, a constant dissatisfaction with the present moment. Vincent was steady and thoughtful, content with the life he had built, always looking for ways to improve things gradually rather than seeking dramatic changes. One evening, as Adelaide was preparing supper, Marcus approached her in the kitchen. "Adelaide, may I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course." "I wanted to say again how sorry I am for what I put you through, and I wanted you to know that I can see how happy you and Vincent are together. It is clear that you love each other deeply, and I am genuinely glad. Vincent deserves that kind of love, and so do you." "Thank you, Marcus. That means a lot to hear. I also wanted to tell you that I will be leaving soon, not because Vincent asked me to, but because I need to find my own path. Being here, seeing what you two have built, it makes me realize how much I need to grow up to figure out who I am and what I want. I cannot do that in Vincent's shadow." Adelaide nodded, understanding. "Where will you go?" "There is a ranch in Wyoming that is hiring hands. Hard work, decent pay, no gambling halls within 50 miles. I think that is what I need. A fresh start somewhere where nobody knows me as the irresponsible Brennan brother. I think that sounds like a good plan. And Marcus, for what it is worth, I hope you find what you are looking for." Marcus left a week later on a clear August morning. The brothers embraced, and Adelaide saw tears in both their eyes. Whatever had been broken between them had not fully healed, but they had made peace with each other and with the past. "Write to us," Vincent said. "Let us know how you are doing." "I will, and Vincent, take care of your family. You have built something really special here." They watched Marcus ride away, his figure growing smaller until he disappeared over a ridge. Vincent took Adelaide's hand, squeezing gently. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I am. I hope he finds what he needs, I really do. But I am also relieved. Does that make me a terrible brother? It makes you human. You love him, but you also need to protect your own peace and your own family. There is no shame in that." Life returned to its peaceful rhythm. Summer faded into autumn, and they prepared for another winter. William grew rapidly, becoming more alert and interactive each day. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, especially at his father. Vincent was utterly besotted with his son, spending every free moment playing with him and talking to him about the ranch and the animals. Adelaide had never imagined she could be this happy. The life she had led in Boston seemed like something from another lifetime, pale and insubstantial compared to the vivid reality of her days now. She loved the work, the land, the community they were part of. Most of all, she loved Vincent with a depth and certainty that still sometimes took her breath away. "Do you ever regret coming west?" Vincent asked her one evening as they sat on the porch, William asleep in her arms. "Never. Not for a single moment. Even with all the hardship and uncertainty at the beginning, I would do it all again, because it brought me to you. I think about what might have happened if Marcus had been here when you arrived, if you had married him as you planned. The thought terrifies me. I cannot imagine my life without you now. But that did not happen. We found each other instead. Maybe that was how it was meant to be all along." As winter approached again, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant with their second child. Vincent's reaction was even more exuberant than the first time, sweeping her into his arms and declaring it the best news he had ever received. "William needs a sibling," he said, kissing her soundly. "Someone to help him run the ranch when we are old and gray." The pregnancy was easier this time, perhaps because Adelaide knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was stronger now, her body accustomed to the demands of ranch life. She continued working through most of the winter, with Vincent hovering anxiously whenever she lifted anything heavier than a dishcloth. Marcus wrote occasionally, letters that arrived every few months describing his life in Wyoming. He seemed to be doing well, taking his work seriously, staying away from gambling. He had met a young widow who ran a boarding house in town, and his letters mentioned her with increasing frequency. Adelaide and Vincent were glad to hear he was moving forward with his life, building something positive. Spring brought the birth of their daughter. The labor was quick and intense, and before the midwife could even arrive, Adelaide delivered the baby with only Vincent there to help. He was terrified but steady, doing exactly what Adelaide told him to do, and when their daughter slipped into his waiting hands, he looked at Adelaide with such awe and love that she started crying. "You did it," he whispered. "You are incredible." They named the baby Rose after Vincent's mother. She was small and perfect, with Adelaide's auburn hair and Vincent's blue eyes. William, now 18 months old, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to touch her constantly with his chubby toddler hands. The ranch continued to prosper. Vincent expanded their operation, buying additional land and increasing their herd. He had a gift for breeding good horses, and word spread about the quality of Brennan stock. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, with enough to meet their needs and save for the future. Adelaide established a small school in their home for William and the children of neighboring ranches. There was no proper schoolhouse within reasonable distance, and she wanted to make sure the children in their community had access to education. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and history 3 days a week, and the parents paid her in eggs, butter, vegetables, or whatever they could spare. It was fulfilling work, and she loved seeing the children's minds open to new ideas. When William was 4 and Rose was 2, Adelaide became pregnant again. This time she carried twins, a fact that was not discovered until she went into labor and, after delivering a healthy boy, was shocked to feel more contractions. "There is another one," the midwife said calmly, and 15 minutes later a second boy arrived. Vincent nearly fainted when he was told he had 2 more sons. Adelaide laughed despite her exhaustion, watching her strong cowboy husband go pale and sit down hard on the floor. They named the twins Samuel and Thomas. They were identical, with dark hair and mischievous smiles even as infants. The house was suddenly very full and very loud, but Adelaide and Vincent loved every chaotic moment. Marcus visited when the twins were 6 months old. He brought with him his new wife, a quiet, kind woman named Sarah who immediately fit in with the family. Marcus looked healthier and happier than Adelaide had ever seen him, settled and content in a way he never had been before. "You have a beautiful family," Marcus told Vincent as they watched the 4 children play in the yard. "I am happy for you, brother. This is everything we dreamed about when we bought this land." "It is more than I ever dared to hope for," Vincent agreed. "And I am glad to see you have found your own happiness." The years flowed past like water, each season bringing its own joys and challenges. The children grew, learning to ride and work alongside their parents. William developed his father's patience with animals and his mother's love of learning. Rose was creative and determined, always building or designing something new. The twins were adventurous and inseparable, getting into constant mischief, but also fiercely loyal to their family. Adelaide and Vincent grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had weathered storms, droughts, a devastating winter that killed half their herd, and countless smaller crises. Through it all, they stood together, partners in every sense of the word. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Adelaide on a picnic to a meadow high in the mountains, leaving the children with Martha Sullivan for the afternoon. They sat together on a blanket, looking out over the valley that had become their home. "You remember the day you arrived?" Vincent asked. "How terrified you looked when you stepped off that stage coach." "I remember. I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." "I fell in love with you that very day," Vincent confessed. "When you stood in the yard, trying so hard to be brave even though your whole world had just collapsed. You were the strongest person I had ever met. I did not feel strong. That is what made it even more impressive. You were terrified, but you kept going anyway." Vincent took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "These past 10 years have been the greatest gift of my life. You made me believe in happiness, in the possibility of building something good and lasting. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Adelaide kissed him softly, tasting salt from her own tears. "I love you too. You saved me, Vincent, not just from a difficult situation, but from a life that would never have been enough. You gave me adventure, purpose, love, and a family. You gave me everything." They lay together in the meadow, wrapped in each other's arms, watching clouds drift across the vast Colorado sky. The life Adelaide had left behind in Boston was barely a memory now, as distant and unreal as a story she had once read in a book. This was her real life, the one she was meant to live. A life full of hard work and simple joys, of children's laughter and her husband's steady presence, of endless sky and mountains that touched the heavens. The years continued to pass, bringing more changes and new chapters. William married a rancher's daughter from the next valley when he was 22, and they built a house on the far end of the Brennan property. Rose shocked everyone by deciding to become a teacher and moved to Denver for training, though she visited often and eventually returned to take over Adelaide's school. The twins followed different paths. Samuel became a horse trainer of some renown, traveling throughout Colorado and Wyoming with his stock. Thomas stayed on the ranch, working alongside Vincent and eventually taking over more of the daily operations as Vincent grew older. Adelaide and Vincent became grandparents, then grandparents many times over. Their house was always full of family, especially during holidays and celebrations. Marcus and Sarah remained close, their own family growing and flourishing in Wyoming. The brothers wrote regularly and visited when they could. Their relationship healed and strengthened by time and maturity. As Vincent approached his 60th birthday, he began to slow down, letting Thomas handle more of the heavy ranch work. He spent his days working with the horses he loved, playing with his grandchildren, and sitting on the porch with Adelaide, talking about everything and nothing. "We built a good life," he said one evening, his hand clasped with hers as they watched the sunset. "We did," Adelaide agreed. "Better than anything I could have imagined that day I arrived, lost and frightened." "You were never lost. You were exactly where you were meant to be. You just did not know it yet." Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. After all these years, he still made her feel safe and cherished and deeply loved. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together friends and family from all over Colorado and Wyoming. The house and yard overflowed with people, multiple generations mixing and mingling. Adelaide stood on the porch, watching the festivities with a full heart. Vincent came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy," he murmured, "completely. You, more than I have words to express." As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the yard, someone brought out a fiddle and music filled the air. Vincent took Adelaide's hand and led her into the yard, pulling her close for a dance. They moved together to the music, their bodies knowing each other so well after 25 years that they needed no conscious thought to match their steps. Around them, their children and grandchildren danced, laughed, and celebrated. This was the legacy they had built together, not just the land and cattle and horses, but the family, the love, the community. Adelaide looked up at Vincent's face, lined now with age but still handsome to her, his blue eyes still capable of making her heart skip beats. "I would choose you," she said suddenly. "In every lifetime, in every circumstance, I would choose you." Vincent's eyes grew bright with emotion. "And I would choose you, always and forever." They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built. The mail-order bride who had arrived to find her groom gone had instead found something infinitely better. She had found her true home, her true love, her true purpose. And she had lived happily, raising her children in the shadow of the Colorado mountains, growing old alongside the kind cowboy who had asked her to stay, and then spent every day of his life making sure she never regretted that decision. Years later, when Adelaide was in her 70s and Vincent had passed peacefully in his sleep at 78, she would sit on that same porch and tell her grandchildren the story of how she came to Colorado. She would tell them about the groom who disappeared and the brother who offered her sanctuary. She would tell them about falling in love slowly, about building a life one day at a time, about the beauty that could come from tragedy. But for now, on this perfect evening, she was still held in her husband's arms, dancing under the stars, living the happily ever after she had never dared to dream was possible. The music played on, the lanterns glowed warm against the darkness, and Adelaide knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, exactly where she had always been meant to be. The seasons continued their eternal cycle in the Colorado mountains. Adelaide continued teaching for several more years, passing on knowledge to another generation of frontier children. She wrote letters to Rose in Denver and received long replies full of her daughter's experiences in the growing city. William and his wife gave her more grandchildren, who ran wild through the ranch, learning the same lessons their father had learned about horses and cattle and the land. Thomas married eventually, a strong-willed young woman who reminded Adelaide of herself at that age. They moved into the main house with Adelaide after Vincent's passing, and the sound of young voices once again filled the rooms that had briefly fallen quiet. Adelaide lived to see the new century arrive, witnessing the changes that came to the West as it slowly shed its wild character. She saw automobiles appear on the roads, electricity reach even remote ranches, and the old ways gradually give way to the new. But through all the changes, the Brennan Ranch remained a constant, passed down through generations, a testament to the love and hard work of the woman from Boston and the cowboy who had asked her to stay. On a warm spring morning when Adelaide was 82, she passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the same bed where she had slept beside Vincent for 25 years and alone for another 17. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her in those final days, telling stories and singing songs and making sure she knew how loved she was. They buried her beside Vincent on a hillside overlooking the valley with a simple stone that read, "Adelaide Brennan, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, the woman who stayed, and though Adelaide was gone, her legacy lived on." Her great-grandchildren would play in the same meadows where she had walked with Vincent. Her descendants would work the same land, raise cattle and horses, and tell the story of the mail-order bride who arrived to find her groom gone and instead found something infinitely more precious. She found love, real and lasting, with the kind cowboy brother who offered her sanctuary, and then spent his life making sure that sanctuary became a true home. The Colorado mountains stood eternal watch over the Brennan Ranch, the aspens turning gold each fall just as they had for all the years Adelaide and Vincent had been together. The creek still ran clear and cold, the meadows still burst with wildflowers each spring, and the legacy of two people who had chosen love over circumstance, partnership over convenience, and commitment over easy paths continued to shape the lives of everyone who came after them. It was a story worthy of the Wild West, of mail-order brides and frontier justice and hard-won happiness. But more than that, it was a love story, pure and simple, the kind that transcends time and circumstance. Adelaide Winston had stepped off a stagecoach in 1878, terrified and alone. Adelaide Brennan left this world surrounded by love, having lived a life richer and fuller than she had ever imagined possible. And somewhere in the great beyond, a cowboy with blue eyes and a gentle smile was waiting, ready to take her hand and lead her into whatever adventure came next, because their love was the kind that not even death could end. It was the kind that would echo through generations, inspiring others to be brave, to take chances, to believe that even when plans fall apart, something better might be waiting just around the corner. The Brennan Ranch still stands today, operated by Adelaide and Vincent's descendants, a living monument to a love that began with an act of kindness and grew into a legacy that would never be forgotten. The story of the mail-order bride and the cowboy brother is still told, passed down through the family like a precious heirloom, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with love at first sight, but with simple human kindness that blossoms into something extraordinary.